Katrina, you online?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Can now, yeah. Councillor Duran, you
Great.
there?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, we're both here. Okay. We'll start in a couple minutes. Is there any conflicts of interest?
None.
Seeing none.
What?
Can we have approval of the agenda?
Moved.
Okay. Any business arising from the minutes?
None.
Seeing none, we'll move into the reports. Future climate projections and climate action plan update. Katrina, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, great. Thanks. You
Thank
can still
you.
hear me okay?
Yes, hear you great.
Okay. Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for patching me in here. This first report is really to give you an update on the climate action plan work that's been taking place. As most of you know, that's been taking place over the last year or so, but there's been a lot of progress made in the last few months. So we just want to make sure that everybody's up to date, knows what's going on, and has a chance to ask questions. So we began work on phase 2 of the project in September of this year. We'd done some background research and early engagement in early 2023. And then, later in the summer, we began phase 2. So you may remember us speaking about the Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities program through ICLEI, which came through committee. And that's a framework and some support from the organization that guides us in our climate adaptation planning. So one of the things that ICLEI has supported us in that has been really great is creating a report on our future climate projections. So really digging into the climate science of what types of changes we can expect to see in the climate in Charlottetown. And so that report is attached to the report I'm presenting now. I'll give you kind of the overview, but you can also review that at your leisure. I'll just note that the projections that are noted are compared to a baseline, and that baseline was between 1971 and 2000. And the projections that we're looking at, they're between the time frame of 2041 to 2070. So that's kind of the time frame that we can see the noted changes potentially taking place. So, for example, we're expecting about a 4.2 degrees Celsius increase in average annual temperature. We'll be seeing an increase in extreme heat days, so those over 30 degrees Celsius. So right now we only have one of those days a year, and we can expect about an average of 14 in that later time period. Our heat waves will go up from 0 to over 4 per year expected. The growing season will increase. We'll actually experience less freeze-thaw cycles. We're expected to have more precipitation by about 110 millimeters annually across all seasons. We'll also see precipitation events become more intense. So we'll get more rainfall over a shorter period of time and experience more extreme weather events in that regard. Of course, we'll see the sea level continue to rise. We expect by about 59 centimeters by 2080 compared to 2006. So that date range is a little different. And then I'll also just note something interesting they looked at was a comparable city that we could look at now who's experiencing the climate change or the climate conditions now that we would be expected to see in the future. And so that comparable city is Stamford in Connecticut, so obviously a little bit south of here. And so that's something that we can look at in our own planning to see what kind of things they are doing now to make their city resilient that maybe we can adopt here to sort of future-proof ourselves. So that has been really beneficial for us to have that information. We're currently using it to create a climate risk and vulnerability assessment, and then we'll take that assessment and use it to create targeted actions that we'll put into the plan itself. I'll also note that we've completed, or Nick has completed, a community greenhouse gas inventory that he'll speak to in a little bit, but that's another set of data that will be informing this plan in a big way. So something else that we've been working on with the Climate Action Plan are working groups. So we wanted to put together 2 different working groups, one around climate adaptation, so building up our resiliency, and one around climate mitigation, so decreasing our greenhouse gas emissions. And those groups are composed of city departmental staff, provincial staff, and then a number of representatives from community organizations. And the idea being really that they guide this every step of the way. The plan will be, primarily sit within the city, but we're hoping as well that all of those collaborators that we work with will take their own pieces of it as well. And we want to tap into that expertise and have their buy-in. So we have over 65 individuals taking part in those 2 working groups. And they've been going really well so far. We're off and running with the adaptation group. We'll be getting going with the mitigation group here soon. And we have a lot of really eager people on those 2 groups that have been really great to work with. And then, of course, we'll be undertaking extensive community engagement to inform the plan. I think this is a chance to get the community's input and get us all on the same page as it comes to climate action and really work collaboratively with the community on climate action because, of course, the city can't do it alone. So we're taking a slightly unique approach that we're quite excited about. So we'll be offering engagement events in a number of different ways, but one of them is by working with engagement collaborator organizations. So those organizations, maybe represent or interact with networks of people that we think are really key in informing the climate action plan. And they will conduct engagement on our behalf, working with us, of course, to better understand the climate concerns of those that they work with. And feed that back to us to inform the climate action plan. So those organizations are BIPOC Usher, Creative PEI, Fusion PEI, or Fusion Charlottetown would be, Native Council of PEI, and STEAM PEI. So they, as I said, they'll offer an event of some kind over the next couple of months. They've also received facilitation training through the Climate Sense program that our environment and sustainability staff received as well. So really to help us guide those conversations with the community. And then they'll also be attending some of our other engagement events, as well as reviewing the plan, the draft plan when it comes time. So then in addition to the work that those collaborators will be doing, of course, we'll be doing some engagement ourselves as staff. So we'll be integrating that into a number of our annual departmental events, as well as hosting kind of like a larger town hall type event in June. So we'll keep you posted on when all of that will be if you have any interest in attending. And then just to let you know kind of about the timeline, so the community engagement will be taking place between April and June, so over the next couple of months. The working groups will be ongoing until we have a draft plan, which we anticipate will be in the mid to late fall of this year. And then that will be presented, and we're hoping to have that finalized draft early in 2025 to present for adoption. So I'll pause there and happily take any questions you might have.
Any questions?
I do.
Go ahead.
Katrina, if I go to your document on page 5, the organization's collaborating with the city, BIPOC or Usher, is it Usher? Is it Usher?
Yeah.
Creative PEI, Fusion PEI, Native Council. URSA, which is Immigration Refugee Service Association, they represent a broad range of nationalities that would, they would have access or have firsthand knowledge about situations in their own home countries. Should we not be reaching out to URSA?
So,
The other group would be, I know you have Native Council, but you have to look at MCPEI, Mi'kmaq Confederacy of Prince Edward Island, and Olney. Their influence or their connections go right across this country and probably across North America. So those are other organizations that should be around the table as part of the collaborating team.
yeah, certainly. So through you, Mr. Chair, URSA, we have spoken with URSA a couple of times. It seems like maybe staff capacity is a little bit of a challenge right now, so they don't seem to have been able to take a lot extra on, but we're certainly speaking with them and working with them. I know Nick is going to be doing some energy efficiency talks with them, and we're going to work in some opportunities for speaking with them about this plan and their ideas there at that time, and maybe some other workshop type situations. So that's kind of where things stand with URSA, but certainly that conversation is ongoing. And then in terms of the Mi'kmaq Confederacy as well as Onwe, we've been in contact with both of them as well. So there's a representative from the Mi'kmaq Confederacy of PEI on one of the working groups that's been active. And then in terms of Onwe, that will be an ongoing conversation as well to provide feedback as we move through the planning process. So apologies, I should have probably mentioned that.
And just to follow up, Mr. Chair, on page 4, future climate projections. Pretty stunning there. It's going to be, I know that if media is listening in on this conversation that, we're looking at 4.2 degree Celsius increase in, so that's higher than what they're looking for the world. Like, so I think the world is looking at, I think UN climate, the organization is looking at an increase in 2 degrees. We're saying 4.2. It must be because we're on a northeastern coastal area of the world. But also, like, these are pretty staggering numbers. And I know they span over, 50, 60 years. So, but still cause for a lot of concern. And our connecting or benchmark here for communities is Stamford, Connecticut. As you noted, that's fairly south of where we are, so their climate is a little different than ours. Any Canadian equivalents? Have we searched out any Canadian equivalents, Canadian community equivalents?
That's something that I can speak with. So it was ICLEI staff that did the bulk of the work on that report. I'm not 100% sure exactly how they came to that equivalent. I think that probably just given the southern nature of the United States, that the most comparable places would be in the States at this point. But I can ask them if anywhere came up that would be in Canada. There might be some places, say, in southern Ontario.
Just a last question, Mr. Chair. This is on, again, page 4. So, and this is for Jessica too and her team. Our integrated community sustainability plan, every year we put one out, or every 2 years, I think. Are we coming up with one this year? And is that also going to include our community energy plan? Katrina, I think I can ask Jessica that. Jessica, you don't mind answering?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, Katrina could answer it probably better than me because she's leading it, but through you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, Katrina's just wrapping up that. Every year we do an annual report on the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan.
Yeah.
So Katrina, you could jump in on the timeline, but it's almost complete now. And the idea behind this report and the Climate Action Plan is to integrate the Community Energy Plan and the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan. So we just have one plan that we go by, so those will feed into the...
So as manager and collaborating with Katrina, that's coming out this year. There will be 2 reports that we'll be able to put up on our social media to say that...
Katrina, do you want to answer the question specifically about the timeline for the report that's coming out?
Sure, yeah. So we're just putting the final touches on the annual report for the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan. So hopefully we'll have that for you at the next meeting. And of course, we'll promote that to the public. So essentially that just reports on what we did in the last year in the 2023 calendar year that worked towards the goals and actions of the ICSP, the Sustainability Plan. So we'll have that to go out. But essentially, this work on the Climate Action Plan is building upon the ICSP and the Community Energy Plan. They're both at the end of their lives, those plans that have been really great in guiding the department. So they will be combined and built upon in this Climate Action Plan. So essentially, we will continue to be guided by this new Climate Action Plan starting hopefully in about a year's time or a little less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Trevor? No. Katrina, I'm just going to get you to go through the temperature extremes sheet. So the 2 time periods, bottom baseline, 71 to 2000. So I'm just trying, are we saying that 38 days was between 71 and 2000 was the number of ice days, and that should increase to 71 days in the future, 2041 to 2070?
Are you into the report itself now?
Yep.
Okay, what page?
Temperature extremes, I think it was the second or third page.
So
Page 8.
you're looking at the ice days?
Page 8.
Page 8, the mayor says.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're looking at the ice days, was it you said?
What's that?
What was it? Which metric were you looking at?
I'm looking at the temperature extremes, and I'm looking at number of ice days, and it's saying
Yeah.
38 to 71, for example, or over
Yeah,
30.
I find the representation's a little bit confusing. So essentially, the bottom one is the baseline, and the top one is the future, and then the arrow makes it confusing. So essentially, we're going from having 71 ice days in that earlier baseline, so 71 to 2000, and we'll have 31 or 38 ice days in the future, so in that 2040 to 2070 sort of range.
So then over 30 degrees Celsius, we normally would have 1 day, and we're expected to have 14?
Correct. And now, I mean, recognizing, so that baseline was 1 day between 1971 to 2000. So my guess would be we already probably have more than 1 day on average over 30. But from that baseline to the future projections, we expect to go from 1 to 14.
Okay, yeah, good point. Okay. The other question I had, Katrina, so the greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted into the atmosphere, and we're always looking to reduce that.
Yeah.
Do we have any data or any measurements to know what the greenhouse gas emitted in the air and the improvements that we would have been making over the last number of years?
Yeah, so I will let Nick, in 2 reports from now today, Nick will be talking a little bit about our community greenhouse gas inventory.
Okay,
So
perfect.
he'll speak to that then.
Any other questions for Katrina? Anybody? Thank you, Katrina. Okay, we'll move on to Quest Canada's Net Zero Communities Accelerator Program.
Perfect. So you're stuck with me again.
Yep.
So yeah, this is kind of building upon the last report. We have an opportunity to partner with Quest Canada to get a little bit of extra guidance, support, and expertise behind our climate action planning process as it comes to that greenhouse gas reductions component. So essentially, the program that I'll describe is very similar to the program that we're already participating in with ICLEI Canada, so that Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities program, except that program focuses on climate adaptation, and the Quest program focuses on climate mitigation or the greenhouse gas reductions. So the program that they have is called the Net Zero Communities Accelerator Program. And it provides a whole host of resources, guidance that help communities to do their energy planning. They've already piloted this program in New Brunswick and in the Prairies, but they've recently received funding to expand it to the entire Atlantic region. You can see there a list of the types of services we'd get by participating. Essentially, we'd get an energy benchmark assessment. We get to do an energy mapping workshop. They would assist with our workshops around action identification and implementation. They would do a couple of reports for us. One would focus on the economic impact of the planning that we're doing. So I think that would be quite interesting for us to see. They would do some emissions forecasting for us. And we would get a number of other sort of access to webinars and training and that kind of thing. So we would be expected as staff to contribute about 24 working days over the next 10 months. But that's kind of already factored in to the work we're putting forward for this climate action planning process. So originally we had proposed doing most of the climate mitigation planning in-house, but certainly we see this as an opportunity to have some extra needed support as well as that expertise that we may have actually had to hire some consulting support for without this opportunity coming up. And so I'll just highlight that it's a $6,000 fee for participation, but that covers in excess of $25,000 worth of services due to the funding that Quest has received. So we're looking for your approval today to join that Net Zero Communities Accelerator program through Quest.
I'm sorry, Katrina, I didn't hear that. You're looking for what?
Your approval to join the program, basically, their Net Zero Communities Accelerator program that would give us that whole list of benefits.
Okay, I thought we already did. To be honest with you, I thought we already did, but anyway.
Yeah, so did I.
Did we not already
No.
approve this?
So you approved our work with ICLEI Canada through the Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities program, but this opportunity with Quest Canada for the Net Zero Communities Accelerator program, so focusing on the mitigation, climate mitigation side, is just a new opportunity that's just come up in the last month or so.
Get you, I got you, okay.
So, Mr. Chair, does this fall under the HAF, did you say? Housing Accelerator, can we get funding through that? Can we use that fund for that? Katrina, maybe
Through
Katrina?
the chair, I'm not aware of this connected to the Housing Accelerator Fund, that might,
No?
but,
I'm not either.
so this is funding through Quest, so to do climate mitigation planning in addition to the work we've been doing already on the climate action
And I
plan.
can see that, Your Worship.
Yeah, so what's, again, the cost is 6,000, 25,000, I see.
The cost to the city is
$6,000?
$6,000 for a $25,000 program due to funding that Quest has received towards the project.
Yeah, so for 6,000, we get $25,000
Yeah,
worth of work.
yeah. But can I just ask, Mr. Chair, again, Katrina, so BARC is building adaptive and resilient communities? So BARC, is that the same group that gave you the first report? Did they work on that? With
Yeah.
the- Okay, so just going back to that, the UN is looking at 1.5 degrees increase in the temperature world. And BARC is saying 4.2, so anyways, is BARC US-based, Katrina?
No, it's Canadian based. But I think the discrepancy you're seeing is a result of, well, one, that there's a good chance that we won't meet those climate targets globally that you're describing, like the 1.5 degrees, unfortunately, but also that we know that not all places are affected equally. So that's an average temperature. You know, we're northern, and so we do expect different areas to see different, more or less extreme temperature changes.
I'll move it.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer myself, too. So Trevor, do you have any questions?
No questions, just, well, kind of a question, I guess. Under financial implications at the end, it's saying taking the money out of the 23-24 budget. Should that be 24-25?
Probably now.
No, the hope is we're all kind of set to go, and as long as things are approved today, you know, we've already been working with them, so the hope is to expense it this fiscal.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Perfect. So we have a mover and a second to move it ahead? Moved
Yeah,
by
I'll
Mayor,
second it.
Second by Bobby or Trevor, yep. Okay, thank you. Thanks again, Katrina.
Thank you. Thanks.
Next is Nick on the Community Greenhouse Gas Inventory Update. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to just provide an update on the community greenhouse gas inventory, since it's kind of relevant to some of the other reports that were given today and with the climate action plan that we're currently working on. So the city maintains two greenhouse gas inventories. One is the community greenhouse gas inventory, and so that's for the entire city. That's the residents, commercial properties, everything. included in that. And the other one is the corporate greenhouse gas inventory. And so that's only city buildings and fleet and transportation, that sort of thing. So right now, this report's on the community. Next month, I'll report on the corporate greenhouse gas inventory. There's, you can see the attachment is a report that was done by a graphic designer, and it's going to be included, it's kind of part of our annual report. And so the main kind of takeaways from this is that the greenhouse gas emissions of the city have increased slightly from the 2015 baseline year. But the thing to keep in mind is that the population has also increased. And so the per capita greenhouse emissions has decreased from 11.5 to 10.4. You know, that we should still be on track a little bit better than that, but that's kind of how the numbers have come out.
What was that number again, Nick? The decrease?
So from 11.5 tons per resident in 2015 to 10.4 tons in 2022. So the numbers are updated to 2022, just based on the data availability.
Okay, thanks.
So a few more takeaways from the report. Transportation, the transportation sector as a whole accounts for almost 50% of the total emissions. So this sector includes road transportation, marine, air travel. So that's a big area of focus for sure. The industrial, commercial, and agriculture sectors have had kind of the largest decreases in their emissions. The agriculture, you have to keep in mind that that's a very small section of our city, but that sector those three sectors have decreased the most. Gasoline is the largest energy source with the largest emissions, so that kind of pertains to the transportation sector mostly. And electricity usage has increased while fossil fuels have decreased. So that that aligns with the provincial and the federal kind of programs that have increased the heat pump usage in the province. So that's kind of what we want to see, the electricity to increase, and then the greenhouse gases or the fossil fuels to be decreasing at the same time. It's heavily because of heat pumps being used for heating. So just something to note is that our previous community greenhouse gas inventory was done using 2015 as the baseline year. We're still using 2015 as the baseline, but due to changes in calculation methodology, that sort of thing, we've updated the 2015 baseline that was done in our last inventory, just with more accurate numbers anywhere where we can be using actual numbers and not just larger assumptions. We're trying to make it more and more accurate each year.
Okay.
And so another thing that has been updated is that now it can be done on a more annual basis and not just 5 years from now we'll do it again. It'll be each year we gather the data again and update it. So this can kind of be a report that can be done every year now. And so you'll notice if you do go back to the previous inventory report, the numbers will have changed, and that's just due to different way of calculating those numbers.
Okay.
And so in our community energy plan and to be carried forward into our climate action plan, but currently we have a target to reduce our community greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 60% by 2030. So based on just that track, so the target should be in 2022, 307, almost 308,000 tons of carbon dioxide. But the actual emissions in 2022, based on this inventory, were more like 416,000 tons. So it's 35% higher than where we should be. So when I mentioned before that, it's gone up a little bit, the per capita has gone down. But if we're trying to hit a certain point on the graph, we're 35% higher than where we should be. So this just sort of demonstrates, that more efforts should be taken on a community approach.
So Nick, just to stop there, when you say more effort should be taken on the community approach, what do you mean by that?
Well, it just means, the community as a whole is a little bit more difficult for this city to directly influence. Like, we can make changes to our own buildings and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So it is a little bit more difficult for sure. But it's things like the Switch program has done a big chunk of helping the residential sector kind of reduce its emissions.
Okay.
We could be doing programs for commercial, industrial, transportation for sure. So all those things just we kind of need to have some programs to address all those sectors.
Okay, thank you. Is that it? Is that your report?
Yes, that's the report.
Any questions? You want to go first? Well, Councillor Duran, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good, Terry, thank
Good.
you.
Okay. It's up to you. You can go.
So, Nick, you always do a great job. Same as Katrina, the whole staff there at Environment Sustainability Department do a great job in bringing in the numbers. So, you talk about commercial, industrial users and residential, okay? So who are the biggest, what of those 3 or 4 groups, who are the biggest polluters? Would it be residential because there are more homes, or I'm just trying to get a sense.
Yeah, I don't have the. Let me just pull up the report here.
What page are you on in that report, if I could? 22? Yeah?
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of the third page of the report, if you include the title page. But there's the community greenhouse gas emissions by sector. You can see it as kind of a bar graph and then a pie graph. The pie chart is just the breakdown for 2022, but the bar graph shows year over year. So you can see transportation is almost, that's where I mentioned that it's almost half. After that, it's residential. Then after that is commercial. And those are, they might go up and down year after year, but they're about a quarter or less of our total emissions between those two sectors. They're about a quarter each or so.
Yeah.
But residential it typically is a
It's
little bit more.
25%,
Yeah.
right? And I always thought it'd be higher, Nick, because your home goes 24 hours, right? Your car only goes when you go from point A to point B. So transportation is diesel, gas, and so forth. So going after EVs and pushing that more and more, that will hopefully bring that down, correct? Is that a fair assumption to make on your part?
Yeah, it also includes, like I said, marine and air travel, which aren't a huge portion of that, but it is still included in there. So
Yeah, transportation wouldn't be airplanes and super tankers. Most of that would be vehicles on the road
yeah,
worldwide.
Majority of it, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So, Mr. Chair, when you look at residential, Lori and I took advantage of the Switch program. It's a big change in how we consume energy. Rarely turn on our furnace, which is great for the environment, but how we can control that heat pump, which is excellent. You don't have to have it on all the time. And we have baseboard heating, so you have to heat up the whole house before you can get warm in any part of it. Right now with the heat pump, it's directed towards that. But this keeps coming up, and I think, Mr. Chair, you mentioned it too. Like, the more demands we put on our electrical utilities, through homes, through EVs, e-bikes, and so forth, is there a way to monitor how we're going to take care of that increase? Maybe that's something you don't want to answer, Nick, but there must be something in your mind thinking, how do we address it?
Through you, Chair. It maybe is a bit above the scope of this, and it's maybe more a question for the province and for Maritime Electric. It is definitely going to be a problem at some point, by the 2050, kind of 2040. If everybody's going to be switching to electricity, it needs to be addressed. It just means maybe, our goal is to have a fully renewable city by 2050. That was our current goal. So that means, wherever our electricity, wherever our energies come from, needs to be renewable based on our community energy plan. So it means wind and solar, whether that means that the energy that we're buying from New Brunswick needs to be 100% renewable, or we take it on all ourselves and just put in enough solar to fully heat and electrify our city. So it's definitely something that needs to, definitely a concern. But I kind of trust that the province has done some foresight into how that's going to look in the future.
And Mr. Chair, the last point on this is the only reason I bring this up, like, we need a national energy grid. Like, you look at power in Quebec, huge amounts of power because of their hydroelectric dams in the north of up in Chicoutimi area and so forth. That grid has to be, I think municipalities, FCM, has to be pushing the federal government to get all provinces connected. And if you look at what's going on in Newfoundland with the expansion of hydroelectric power there in their province and in Labrador, like, there's vast amounts of energy. We just don't have to depend on New Brunswick, because when Point Lepreau shuts down, that, I think 15% of our energy needs for the island come from Point Lepreau, so they have to get that power from somewhere else. So that national grid, I think FCM has to be pushing hard on it, because when I go home at noon hour, I'll turn on BNN, Bloomberg News Network. I always look at the WTI, which is the Western Texas Intermediate on where oil is. Every time it goes up a few cents, well, a few days down the road, it's going up at the pump. So people tell us, people say we're getting, sucked, I shouldn't say lured into, but we're being pushed into going just electric, and that means we're going to be stuck with one. Well, with Western Texas Intermediate, every time it bumps up, we're paying the cost of it. So whether it's electrical rates or WTI on the stock market, look, let's use both. But going EV, going race to zero for the city, for the province, for the country, it's where we have to go, because climate change, rising sea levels, all reality. It's not something going away. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I would think just on that same thing, I would think, Nick, that all the solar panels people putting on their homes and the windmills and so on is part of the plan to create more clean energy. So I think that the province would be thinking that way going into the future, where they expand on them.
Yeah, and part of our climate action plan will be we've got a group of experts in the city, in the province that we're collecting. They're going to be giving us lots of good feedback that we put into a report, and then we'll have, by the end of it, a brand new list of things we should be doing in the next 30 or so years. So, in our previous community energy plan, it has things like encourage solar on houses and that sort of thing. And a lot of the stuff we've done, we've encouraged it, and there's rebates for it. So going forward, we're going to need some kind of more hard actions of things we need to be doing, and kind of clearer tasks to do. So.
Okay, thank you. I'll probably bring this up now. It's going to be the last part of the report, but the provincial energy generation. So I see, Nick, in your report, fossil fuels is decreasing because of the energy efficiency, such as heat pumps and the energy efficiency that it's out, whether through the SWITCH program or through the provincial program. So you try and get a win on one side, you start having people coming off fossil fuels, and then you have the increasing going on through electricity. And I'm just wondering, I think we probably should support the province in doing their report on energy distribution and energy growth, and the possibilities they may come up with on the report through Maritime Electric, what Maritime Electric offers, and whether they can have a provincial-wide energy system and distribution or not. But I think, for me, I know I would be supporting the report, see what the report comes out with, but certainly moving ahead with it. So because of what we're seeing, we're kind of making strides, but then once it start costing the consumer more money, they're going to start backing off on, go back to fossil fuels or wherever that may be. So I do support the province in moving down on that report, see what they come up with. So, anybody else?
On that, Mr. Chair, utility companies, in terms of speaking about discussing the province, talking about utility companies and trying to get involved in that business, that type of work or business is not just localized. There's a big infrastructure involved in there, and there's a lot of balls in the air. That's why with, we got sun, we got solar panels, we got wind turbines, but when it's not sunny out and when the wind's not blowing, as Angus Orford always tells me, is that when you go into your house, you still want to turn on your lights. So they need a reliable source. That's why a national energy grid is something that FCM has to be pushing for, so that provinces like the Atlantic provinces can get a cut of that high energy production that occurs especially in Quebec and now in Newfoundland, to share that energy with all Canadians. So I agree. Utilities, I don't know where the province is going with it, but it's a very delicate area. Now we can refer to Summerside Electric Company, but where does Summerside get their power from? They still get it from Maritime Electric. I know they have alternative sources, wind and solar, but again, they need a power company that when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing, I can still turn on my lights when I go into my home or my office. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's, from the province and the minister to look to go down this road. It is pretty bold. It's a pretty big request, and I know it's been looked at a few times in the past, over the last number of years. But I think at the same time, the direction we're moving, something's going to have to happen. And at the end of the day, if the province was looking after the electric generation and distribution, and it may be a split, I don't know, but I'm in favor of them looking into it, and I'm hoping this committee will support that too, and we'll see what the report comes out at. So, everyone okay with that? Okay. Bobby, you okay?
Yes, I am, Terry. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we're going to talk on the PEI Climate Challenge Fund, project summary and Charlottetown's flood protection rebate program. 23 update by Alistair. Alistair, you're up, buddy.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned there, this is a summary report of two separate programs. I'm going to kind of start talking about the Resilient Homes, Parks, and People project, which was funded through the PEI Climate Challenge Fund. Over the past few years, we've been working on three separate parts of this project. The first one was mainly focusing on community awareness and education, where we were able to deliver a 5-part speaker series. We were able to create a rain garden guide for residents who would be interested in a green infrastructure solution to stormwater that would use local native vegetation. The second part was a lot of different naturalization projects, tree planting that was supported by our urban forestry staff. We were able to do some tree planting along the Confederation Trail between Joe Giz and Longworth Avenue. Some funding went to support a Wrights Creek riparian buffer planting. It supported the Arbor Day field trip we do with grade 6 students every year. And so trees and shrubs were planted in the Victoria Park natural area. And then one of the larger spaces was Evergreen Park out in Winslow. We were able to do some restoration work to remove dead or leaning trees from Fiona and the ongoing issues with the water and flooding within this park. So after those were removed, there was also some invasive species that work that was done, and with the UPEI environmental studies, we were able to do a planting event where we also educated the students on how some urban forestry practices were handled here in Charlottetown. Finally, for the natural spaces work, invasive species were removed, mainly glossy buckthorn in the East Royalty Natural Area or the Acadian Forest. And then finally, as part of the Resilient Homes, Parks and People project, we did a pilot home flood risk assessment program where we did an assessment of which areas of the town flooded the most, and we decided to go with the area around Des Brisets Spring Park. And we were able to offer 100 residents or 100 properties a flood risk assessment where staff would actually go out and assess the property over an 80-point inspection. And over that process, 11 homeowners decided to go ahead with that. And from the report, there was also a rebate which offered those residents funding to implement any of the solutions that would help address the issues that came up in the report. And finally, I guess the big thing from that is we took the feedback that we heard from those residents and going to their basements, walking around their properties, and we developed the flood protection rebate program, which is a separate program that was funded by a donation from the Intact Public Entities. They had a program where they were offering funding to go towards solutions for flooding and wildfires. So we got a donation to deliver this program through them. And over 2023, the funding went to fund rebates in 95 properties across the city. The average project cost for those installations was around $1,500. And these projects were mainly sump pumps and backwater or backup battery systems. Those were the main projects that residents were interested in, though we also supported backwater valves and water alarms or monitors that would hopefully detect a leak earlier on. And then the average rebate provided from those projects was $814, with the maximum being $1,000. We also did a survey to follow up on those who participated, and it found that a lot of those residents had experienced flooding in the last year. The majority of those experienced either financial or mental health implications from that flooding, and that without this program, I think it was maybe around 80% would not have been able to take action immediately to install the devices that they did under this program. So it's definitely been an impactful program, and we're looking forward to hopefully continuing that in the spring. And we will be going back and discussing what worked with this program, where can we make changes, and if there is opportunities to change up the rebate amounts, the rebate percentages. So it's something we will be addressing probably in the coming months once the budgeting period's all wrapped up. And that's the summary there. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Anybody got any questions on that report? Yep. Bobby? Any questions?
No, thank you.
Trevor?
And
Yeah, it's good, Alistair, thank you. I'm just wondering, Alistair, you guys, so you picked Des Brisets and Spring Park as kind of a flood area? That's why you picked that area?
Yeah, so we did an assessment that took into consideration several different things from, known flooding issues from the city's perspective, socioeconomic factors. We tried to address lower income, an area of lower income, an area that had older homes that might be more prone to flooding. So it was a number of
I guess that's where I'm trying to get to, is the areas that are flooding. Do we know why they're flooding?
Yeah, so for that particular area, it's largely because there used to be a spring that ran directly up there. There used to be a pond, and because that was all buried, the water table is very high in that area where sump pumps have to be continuously going.
And that's the, that's the drainage that goes out into the harbor, and if the tide is in, it can't get out and it floods.
Yeah.
So this, okay.
And Mr. Chair, just on that, at the corner of Spring Park Road, Highland, and Des Brisets, that was a basin for, there was bridges, there was actually a wooden bridge that went across there. All that land is reclaimed land. A lot of it's reclaimed. The higher ground would be Highland Avenue. And as for Spring Park Road, in Spring Park, there's a reason it's called Spring Park Road. It's a high water table, and if there's any place in the city for natural ice, winter ice in the winter, it's Spring Park, Des Brisets, and Joe Giz Park.
Yeah. I think you got a good point. I know years ago, if you take the old map of PEI before they reclaim land and you lay it over the new area, all the flood zones
Yeah.
line up with what the infill area.
Yeah, and it's the same, Mr. Chair, down on the waterfront. When people look at the old government grants, that's all reclaimed land. When my mom and dad were growing up, it was called the beaches. There were beach houses down there, and Beach Street got its name from going down to the beach, but it's quite interesting that you get into that. But, Mr. Chair, I noticed that Intac, if I can just ask Alistair, Intac Insurance, Alistair, was part of this
They funded,
funding?
Yes, correct. So they had a limited time funding opportunity, which I think was called I can't remember the exact name off the top of my head, but it did offer up to, I think it was 100,000 for municipalities, for nonprofit organizations, for indigenous communities to address flooding and wildfires. So we were very fortunate. I think we were one of 10 communities or organizations to get that funding. And through that, we've also asked them if there's any interest in partnering in the future. And it sounded like there may be, but to date, I'm not aware of any future opportunities to.
no commitment made.
And the reason I asked, Mr. Chair,
Let me speak
because
twice.
Don Iveson, who's former mayor of Edmonton, he was at our FCM last year, Federation of Canadian Municipalities Annual Meeting, and he was speaking on behalf of Cooperators Insurance about insurance companies now are really zeroing in on climate change and how it's affecting properties, flooding, fires, and so forth. So it's interesting to see that Intac is part of this this study this funding because they are very concerned about the cost to insurance companies. But one report that we should take in mind, Alistair, is the Housing and Climate Report that was issued. The co-chairs are Don Iveson and Lisa Rada, who's a former Tory MP. I think that has a lot of good information in that report about municipalities adapting to climate change through flooding, cutting out wooded areas for expansion of homes and so forth, and how that's impacting wildlife and how that's impacting, our bodies of land that absorb carbon dioxide and so forth. So there's some good reports out there, but Don Iveson he's on top of this. He's really zeroed in, and his housing and climate.ca report is something you should look at. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Alistair, I just got a couple of small questions for you. Just wondering, 100 residential properties were offered free home flood risk assessments. 11 completed with homeowners. So is there others still in the works, or was there only 11 out of the 100?
Yeah, so there was 100 that were offered. There were a number of residents that decided not to go forward with the assessments. There was some, there was a number of reasons why they were interested, but we were limited to a certain amount of a time period where we're able to offer, offer that. We did a training to do this flood risk assessment, and we had 2 interns that were on at the time who were helping out. And one of the things we did find from this was a lot of the homeowners were aware of a lot of the issues. They were very well versed in flooding as they were experiencing it, unfortunately, which is one of the reasons we went for more of the rebate, that there wasn't an assessment needed. Homeowners, they largely knew what would help their properties.
Okay. Thanks. I want to comment on 321 native trees and shrubs planted. Good job. The invasive species removal in the Acadian forest, what would be removed?
It was mainly, I think it was all glossy buckthorn. In that area, there's a lot of that's been grown up all around there. There's large patches of it. So it was quite an intensive work as they've grown to a size where it's not just pulling up and getting the roots out. You need more of a trained crew who's experienced at handling that type of work. And I'm sure that Jessica or Simon could speak to that much better than I could.
Anybody want to take that on? Jessica?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm sure you're well familiar with that site, and there's a very active community group that does volunteer work there and have done some planting and invasive species removal. But yeah, it's glossy buckthorn, which is kind of like a dense shrub that is prolific through the site and needs a lot of work to remove it. So because Alistair had this funding, we were able to do some dedicated work to get some invasive species removed there.
So it's a species that grows kind of out of control then, I assume?
Correct,
Okay,
yes,
perfect.
and displaces all the native vegetation that we would like to have. The birds eat the berries and spread it pretty rapidly, and the seeds it produces are huge, so it reproduces all over the site. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions from anybody? We're all good?
No, I'm
Bobby?
good, Terry, thank you.
You're good? All right, so I guess we'll look for a mover to finish up. Trevor, unless you've got anything else? Yep. We already discussed that. We did that in the, did that when we were talking about the energy and energy efficiency. Move to adjourn? Okay, thank you very much, everyone.